Yeah, so I want to introduce tonight's guest speaker. Tonight we have guest Jerry Marzinsky, and he's a retired licensed psychotherapist with over 35 years of experience working with and studying the thought processes and the voices of psychotic and criminally insane patients in some of the most volatile psychiatric institutions in the region, actually in the nation. But he was awarded the state of Arizona's Meritorious Service Award while working in the psychology department of a large state prison. He was also awarded the Pima College's Apple Award for the teaching of abnormal psychology. Jerry has held the position of Second Lieutenant Arizona Civil Air Patrol and is a licensed commercial pilot, a certified scuba diver, and a long-distance motorcycle rider. He also served as an assistant scoutmaster. His formal academic training comprises in a BA in psychology from Temple University and a master's degree in counseling from the University of Georgia and 2 years of study in a PhD psychology program. He is the co-author of An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. So, okay, great. Well, Jerry,
that almost sounds like somebody else's. I guess I did all those things over 70 years or so.
Was it? I mean, you've done some amazing stuff. You're very active, but that's good.
I'm a beat up old frontline soldier. That's what I am.
Oh. Well, you're a warm soul. You know, you're down to earth and you're friendly and you're easy to talk to, and you're here to share some of your experiences to help people realize some other aspects of themselves that they may not be aware of. And that's exactly why I wanted you to be our guest speaker today. So, yeah, so if you will, Jerry, just take it away and start telling people a little bit about your experience and your history and what you've done and what you've discovered.
Well, I want to ask if anybody's got any questions with what they know right now. Fire away. I don't know how much you know about my work and what I've done, or whether you're all cold. I don't know.
I think a lot of people are not quite familiar with the term the archons, and I think, you know, we need to broaden people's perspective of what is really happening here and how we've been. I guess we've just been in the dark about a lot of different knowledge and terminology and things that are all around us because of the nature of our reality and our existence that we've been living in now. You know, we've been sort of blinded with all of Hollywood and, you know, a lot of things that really are just distractions.
So,
Well,
Ellen and Jerry, we do have a hand up, if that helps.
A hand up?
Thank you, Kim.
I'm sorry, we have a question.
Yes.
Oh, go fire away. Where did that come from? Hand up. Sounds like some British term or something.
Sally, go ahead. Up and you're on mute, though.
Sorry.
There we
You're
go.
good.
He had asked if we knew much. I just wanted to let him know that I've watched quite a few of his YouTube videos that were fascinating. That's all.
Well, good. Thank you. If you got any questions, fire away.
Yeah, is that all you learned, Sally? Was that you just recently watched those videos, or did you watch those in the past?
No, I wasn't familiar with him. And
Okay.
when I saw his name, I researched him and I was just fascinated and look forward to today.
Yes, I mean, it really is worth a listen, and it's amazing. So we're going to just let Jerry go ahead, I guess, unless we have some more questions for Jerry.
Okay, how much time we got?
We got as long as you need, but usually we do about 2 hours. So, I mean, you and I did 2 hours just the other month.
Yeah, that was just a little talk there.
No, so just fire away. Just tell us about, you know, where you started and how you started learning about these things that you've learned.
Well, I think it originated. I mean, what I needed was a distrust of authority. And that's what I got. While I was being raised, yeah, my dad, this all played into it. My dad was kind of a rageaholic, and I had no way to get back at him because he was 3 times bigger than I was. So what I would do was drive him to the edge of distraction until he was just about ready to explode, and then I'd back off and disappear. And if I blew it, I paid the price for it really bad. So that came in real handy when I was pushing psychotic prisoners for more and more information, because I almost have a sixth sense for how far I can push them before they start coming unglued. I had a lot of practice at that as a kid. So I was able to get a lot more information out of them than most of the people who worked in the settings I did. And it took a while to learn how to talk to them, because you know, their parents say one of the teenagers starts having a breakdown, starts hearing voices, causes a lot of trouble in the family. They drag him down to the psychiatrist. Psychiatrist says, well, you've got paranoid schizophrenia, you got to take pills for the rest of your life. Put them on these pills. Before that, they even tell they might have told their friends, you know, I'm hearing voices, and they lose their friends. I mean, the friends go, oh, you're possessed, you're weird. So there's really no benefit to a schizophrenic telling anybody about the voices. I mean, and there's even few people they can trust, you know, who don't trust and understand. I'll tell you, if you act like they're hallucinations, they'll cut you right off. They won't tell you anything. So I bought into this chemical imbalance theory of schizophrenia after graduate school. That's what they pushed on me. You know, 4 years of undergraduate and 4 years of graduate school. You know, yeah, it's chemical imbalance or genetics. However, when I got on the front lines and watched what psychiatrists were actually doing, they never, ever gave any kind of test to see what chemicals in the brain were out of balance or by how much. And I found that very odd for, you know, them insisting that schizophrenia was a chemical imbalance. So how do they know? How do they know what's out of balance or by how much? And then I found out they didn't even have a test for it. They had no way, no EKG, no EEG, no nothing to test for it. Yet they're advertising that over the TV on all the drug ads. I saw one at Mayo Clinic just not long ago. They admit, well, we don't know the cause of schizophrenia, but we, you know, research suggests that it is a chemical imbalance. So these drug companies who are pushing this chemical imbalance stuff are making, you know, I think it was either 1.3 or $13 billion a year selling antipsychotic drugs alone. And if you talk to the schizophrenic patients and ask them, did the doctor ever tell you what the side effects of these drugs would be, or did he ever tell you how dangerous these drugs were? No.
So they're basically, yeah, they're just using people as guinea pigs, I guess, just to try.
Yeah, it's almost like a shotgun approach. I mean, they try one drug, that doesn't work. They try another, and then another, and another, and then they increase and decrease the dosages and switch from one to the other, until they find one that they think works best. And even if it works best, it's only suppressing symptoms. It's not curing anything. Mm-hmm. It's only a palliative thing. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a festering sore. Mm-hmm. So they don't know that. Go ahead.
No, it just seems to me like it's almost like it's by design. I don't know. I mean, it's just weird that they would just continue on this path of, you know, trying out all these pharmaceuticals on people. Like it's like a legal way to use them as guinea pigs. I don't know. I mean, well,
that, you know, that's what they've done, and that's what they've always done with psychiatric populations. You know, if you look at the history, they've virtually tortured schizophrenics for decades. I mean, decades. It's almost like they're not human beings, so that they don't treat them as human. They're in another world.
Yeah, I've seen these people walking down the street. You know, when I visit downtown Atlanta, sometimes I will see the raving, what they would call the raving mad walking. And they're like really animated and just having a conversation in their own head.
Well, they're talking to their voices.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and by the way, the huge hospital I worked at back in the 80s was in Milledgeville. You guys are, I'm sure you guys have heard of that, right?
I didn't hear it was the military.
Milledgeville.
Oh,
Georgia.
Milledgeville. Yes, yes, yes. Milledgeville, I'm very familiar with. Like, that's where my mother lives near
Oh,
Milledgeville.
I remember
So-
you telling me that a long time
Yes,
ago.
yes. She
Yeah,
lives in
yeah.
Edenton.
Yeah, that was right next door.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, well,
So-
that's where I spent 7 years in the 80s studying the voices.
Yeah, well, you got to get into all of this because when we talked, I mean, it was just fascinating to sit and listen to all of the experiences that you had when you were there, learning from these patients and what
Well-
you learned.
Well, that's the key. They have the answer somewhere, and I never gave up on them having the answer, but they wouldn't tell me for years. I mean, for years, 7 years before one of them finally told me that the voices were telling her not to take their medications.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first got there, I saw what the psychiatrists were doing, and these neuroleptic drugs are some of the most dangerous drugs used in medicine today. I don't know if you've ever been on any of the psych wards up there.
I know, no.
But they have something that what happened was back in the 30s, the rich guys, the Standard Oil guy, the bunch of them got together and they took over the medical schools and were only teaching, said they would only allow them, they'd only fund them if they would teach psychopharmacology or pharmacology-based medicine. So if they didn't do that, then they wouldn't fund them, and so they made it a requirement to get a license that they had to teach pharmacology-based medicine. So that knocked out all the other different naturopaths, and there was electrical medicine back then. There was all kinds of different branches of treatment spreading out.
Mm-hmm.
And that decree and they bought off Congress and the Senate and Congress too. So they basically hijacked mental health and turned it into a pharmacy show. That's saying they made the Tesla violet ray, they made it illegal. And that was one of the big free treatment things they had back then. You can buy it now. But they made all the other ones were named quacks, and anybody else who taught anything except pharmacology-based medicine were quacks. And they went from there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they're being brainwashed. And nowhere in all the years I spent in college did I hear them teach anything spiritual. Nothing, zero. It was always left brain stuff, right? There was always the reason kind of thing, and memorizing and spitting things back.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, that's basically what school's about, though. It's about, learn this method and repeat after me, spit out this same thing that you're learning from this book. Most people don't know the etymology and the meaning behind pharmakia, though, like where the word comes from. And I looked it up. It's basically based on a Greek word, and it means sorcery and drugs.
Yes. Yep.
So,
Exactly.
it looks to me like, maybe the pharmaceutical companies, because we know how dark they are right now, like what they do to our society.
Yes,
But
very
it
good.
looks to me like they said, okay, we're going to have a legal way to experiment on people publicly with these drugs that, we're just going to test these drugs on these poor people. And
Well, there were two things that they were doing, more than two, but two things that they were doing during the time I was there that were really horrible. One were the shock treatments. So they would they would get the pay. And basically, the shock treatments, they said, were used for depression. And that did work a little bit with depression. It wasn't worth the damage they were doing. I only watched one of those and I almost fainted. And they were doing, and I got a pretty strong stomach and I almost fainted. They were doing 1,300 of those a year at Milledgeville while I was there. And it wasn't the psychiatrists who were calling the shots, it was the attendants. So the attendants would say, hey, Joe Blow over there is giving me a hard time. I think he needs another treatment. He's causing a lot of trouble. And psychiatrists signed him up for another shock treatment. They'd stun him and he's, like walking around like this for a week until he recovers. He had his short-term memory shot. So if you look at all these tactics that psychiatry has been doing since beginning of time, it was always for control.
Mm-hmm.
And they were part of this UN thing too, where they wanted to be the purveyors of reality in this UN session a while back. I think they could be very dangerous people.
Jerry, what years was that going on?
I think it was around 1987, somewhere in there, 1980s, mid 1980s.
Okay.
So they called that treatment. And there was one neurologist who wrote about that and said he could see the damage that these shock treatments were doing after even one, just one of them. And they were doing 1,300. And I don't know if you want to hear what one of them sounds like. I could tell you if you want, but it's awful. Up to you guys.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Well, I would like for you to take us back to your experience at Milledgeville Hospital. When was it that you noticed that something else was going on with these patients?
Well, I started getting suspicious when they wouldn't take their meds. There's no way you could keep them on their meds for any length of time. And I was working in Yarborough, which is a psychiatric rehab center there at the time. So it wasn't just stabilizing these guys. It was stabilizing them, teaching them a trade, and then releasing them onto the streets and getting them out of the hospital. But the main problem with that is they would not stay on those medications. And from one point of view, and everybody I asked, and I asked a bunch of staff, why do they keep going off and then decompensating and becoming psychotic? There were a number of answers to that. I remember one psych nurse said, well, that's just what they do. That's what schizophrenics do. That's just a symptom of schizophrenia. And, yeah. Let me say, the most common answer was they hated the side effects, and the side effects were terrible. I mean, they're absolutely, I could read you 2 pages of it, but they cause this nervous anxiety while you're tired. It's like, taking a hand grenade and throwing it into your brain. It's like a chemical lobotomy. It's not very pleasant at all. I mean, you can't think straight. It affects virtually everything: sexual functioning, work, I mean, it's a terrible drug. But compared to being psychotic, where you see monsters coming out of the wall and people trying to kill you, and you not being able to sleep forever and having nightmares and feeling people are following you around trying to kill you and looking in your windows, and it's about as hellish as you can get. Being floridly psychotic is worse than the side effects of those medications. So I'm like, well, why do they keep going off their medications? I mean, why? And they do it just as they're about to succeed in a class. All of a sudden they go off their meds and then they get thrown out of class and maybe thrown out of school at times for acting out. And I'm like, why are they doing that? I saw the pattern, but I didn't understand why.
Mm-hmm.
So I started asking them, and I started asking the staff, and I got some weird answers from the staff. And the consistent answer I got from the schizophrenics themselves was the side effects were awful, and that was believable. you know. But like I said, they weren't as bad as being floridly psychotic. So for every new patient that went off their meds and all the ones that I had previous, I'd go back and I got a checklist of all the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia and put them in layman's terms, and they're pretty bad. And I'd give the guy, once he recuperated, once we got him back on meds and he was sane again, I'd give him a blank piece of paper and I'd ask him, write down all the symptoms that you got, all the side effects from not taking your meds.
Mhm.
Because they don't all get the same side effects. They react differently. So they'd write down, a handful or so of side effects. And then I gave him the checklist of all the symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia and told him to check the ones he experienced. And after he was done, I'd give them both back and I'd say, which one's worse? And consistently, they'd choose being psychotic is worse. I mean, it was almost 100%. And what do you think the next question would be?
Yeah, like, I mean, that's why would you come off your meds if being psychotic is worse? It's like,
Exactly. That's the same. Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
and
Right
so,
on.
and their response was,
Yeah, what would you guess their response would be? And
The
they were,
voice-
the
the
responses
voice
are all
told them.
they're all consistent.
The voices told them that they were being poisoned, right?
No, that was something else. The reason for them coming off their meds.
Yeah, is it because that they,
Well, let me see, what was it? No, it was a step earlier. It was when I was checking out the side effects. So they gave the explanation that they stopped taking their meds because of the side effects.
because of the side effects? Wow.
That's what they said. But
Mhm.
then when I gave them the list, I did the comparison, said, write down, the symptoms of the side effects you've had, and then check these, symptoms you had of schizophrenia. Which one's worse? They chose schizophrenia was worse.
Mhm.
And then your question came up, then why do you go off the meds? And that goes to, the voices.
The voices told them to, that, yeah. So, and did these schizophrenics, were they constantly seeing these beings that were supposedly talking to them? Did they ever see the entities at all, or did they just hear them most of the time?
Most of the time they heard them,
Mhm.
and it could be hundreds of them. Some of them had hundreds of them. And the more they have, the less likely that the harder it is to get them back to normal again.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, and they were confused about it too, because they didn't, for the most part, they didn't know what the voices were.
Mhm.
They had no idea. It would be, some of them thought they were separate entities. A lot of them believed that, like what psychiatry was telling them, that, they have a chemical imbalance. They have to take these drugs for the rest of their lives, which were, by the way, shrinking their brains.
Mhm.
So you go back to the pharmaceutical stuff again. When they started doing autopsies on schizophrenics, they found that their brains were significantly shrunken like walnuts. So when the researchers brought that up and published it, and couldn't find any other reason for it, they found a correlation, a one-to-one correlation between the ones who were on these psychotropic meds for long periods of time and the brains of those people being shrunk.
Mhm.
So they published that, and the pharmaceutical industry went nuts, and they came back and said, no, it's not the drugs, it's the schizophrenia itself. Whatever the schizophrenia process is, it's destroying their brains. So the researchers went back and did it with rats and monkeys and found out that, yeah, with long-term use, the brains on the rats and the monkeys shrunk.
That's crazy. And there's never any recourse against any of that either with the pharmaceutical industry, is there? I mean, did anybody ever say, oh, well, you guys are putting out this poison that's shrinking people's brains? I don't guess anybody did.
I'm not sure they were aware of that except for maybe the last 10 years or so, maybe 15 years. But back in my time, they weren't. That's the only treatment they had. And that's the only treatment they insisted existed.
Mhm.
That was it. But you know, the pharmaceutical salesmen were there constantly. You know, they'd come in and they'd buy lunches for everybody who would listen to them. And they were the ones who presented this, you know, all these graphs, these fancy graphs, and oh, this is what this drug is, and this is the results we found, and da da da. And you had to trust them. You know, they give these amazing presentations. They pay for your lunch, and you had to trust that what they were telling you was the truth.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I have a friend. He actually delivers food. He lives up in Kennesaw and works for some company delivering food to some of these, I guess, pharmaceutical reps. They buy these doctors' offices different meals because they want to sell more pharmaceuticals to those offices. And he, you know, he's all over Georgia.
Yeah. And
Delivering
they give them tons of samples too.
Yeah, so it's crazy. I mean, it's all just about money, you know, it all
It's all
spins
just
back to
about
money.
money. So, you know, basically what they're doing is destroying the brains of these people that they're putting on these medications. So especially the, you know, the neuroleptic ones. I watched what it did to the people at the state hospital, and they called it the Thorazine shuffle. They couldn't even walk straight. I mean, they just shuffled along with this kind of zombie-like gait. I mean, they just completely destroyed those people. And they had 30,000 of them buried in their cemetery there.
That's crazy. But yeah, let's talk about your experience when you really started realizing that there was something else going on, and you started asking them, you know, to tell you in real time what was going on. Talk about that story, about how you started really doing some investigating into their world and just listening to them.
Yeah, what I found odd, that kicked it off during, while I was at Milledgeville. And what I found was that the schizophrenics never would go down to the ice cream socials, you know, where they got free ice cream and cake. They would stay on the dingy ward, and it was consistent. I'd watch them do this time after time after time. So I was curious about that, and I asked them, well, why are you staying here? I mean, you know, ice cream and cake was hard to come by at that place. And they said, well, we don't like preachers. We don't like, you know, there is no God there. You know, this is, the voices get loud if I try to read the Bible. And I'm like, what? The voices get loud if you try to read the Bible? Yeah. So I started checking that out. And, you know, all the ones on my caseload, I mean, hey, have you ever read the Bible? What do the voices do when you read the Bible? Well, they get loud, they get upset, and they try to block it out. You know, they mock it and they say it's stupid. And that was consistent. And I'm like, well, why would a hallucination do that? Why would a hallucination care about the Bible? You know, that was odd. So here was a pattern with them going off their meds. And I think I told you how that came about, you know, with one patient finally. And this was after 7 years I was in Milledgeville. On the 7th year, one gal, we brought her mother in her, because she was about to be discharged for going off her meds the 3rd time. And the mother said, please don't do that. I can't deal with it. So she said, I'll drive up there. She was coming up from South Georgia. And I want to talk to you. We'll talk her into staying and taking her meds. And the mother was begging her, asking her, why did you go off your meds? And I was asking her too. I said, listen, you're about to get thrown out. Why'd you quit your meds? You know? And she said, you won't believe me. And I said, well, try me. I've heard a lot of strange things while I was here. And she said, the voices told me, you know, that I was being poisoned by the psychiatrist and not to take it. Now, earlier when I first got to Milledgeville, I noticed that psychiatrists were being beat up at a much higher rate than any of the other staff. I mean, psych nurses, psychologists, doctors, anybody except the attendants, and attendants were around them 24 hours a day. And I'm wondering what what are the psychiatrists doing to piss these guys off in 15 or 20 minutes a month? I couldn't fathom it. You know, why are they getting beat up at such a high rate? And that clicked into place when she said the voices told me psychiatry were poisoning, because I'd heard that before. So it sounds like the voices are doing that on a large scale. You know, telling and if you look at the statistics, psychiatrists are assaulted much more than any other doctors, and they have a suicide rate equally as high as schizophrenics. And so there's some kind of entanglement there. But I really couldn't do any real in-depth investigation at Milledgeville, because the unwritten rule was you don't upset psychotic patients, because you don't know what they're going to do, and they were beating up all the psychiatrists. So they didn't want you to do anything. I think they were a little bit afraid of it. So the one time one of them turned me into the psychiatrist and told him I was upsetting him because I was asking too many questions about his voices. And I got pulled up in front of the medical director and ordered to, told the voices are hallucinations. That's what they are. And by you asking questions to these patients about them, you're reinforcing their hallucination and making them worse. And he ordered me to stop. By then I was too far along. I suspected they were, they were, who knows what they were, but they weren't hallucinations. So I had to kind of fly under the radar for a long time there, and I couldn't really dig in. When I got to the state prison in Tucson, those rules no longer applied. I mean, one of the mentally ill prisoners who went to a warden and started complaining that I was asking questions about his voices and that he was being upset. The warden would just get out of my face, man. That doesn't even break the ambient noise level of that place. So what I did is I surrounded myself with 12, 13, usually had at least 10 psychotic, criminally insane prisoners who agreed to tell me in real time whatever their voices were telling me. And that's when things really got interesting. So I suspected the voices had something to do with their behavior, because they, it occupied a good bit of their time. Virtually all of these guys eventually say, one thing they got to struggle with are these voices my thoughts, because they sound like their thoughts. Hold on, let me turn off this. So these voices sound just like their thoughts that they have all day, but the intention is way different. It's very negative, it's very dark. And it's consistently so. So a lot of them, because we're taught from the time we're kids that all your thoughts are your own. If it appears in your head, it belongs to you. Well, that ain't the case.
No, it's not true.
That's not true. And Swedenborg brought that up, the Christian mystic, 700 years ago. He said, none of your thoughts are your own. You're just the receptor. You're like the radio, and the radio waves are coming through. But a lot of these guys realized that the voices weren't who they were. And they were constantly fighting with them and struggling with them and arguing with them and trying to hold them down. So from getting all this information from all these different patients in real time, it was great, because I'd push them as far as I thought they could go. And then I'd kind of let them go and give them some homework, let them go, bring them back the next week and see how they did on their homework. So I was constantly getting more information, constantly. I mean, one thing I found odd was, I found them fascinating. But one thing I found odd, if I worked with more than 2 of them a day, I had no energy left. By the time I got home, I couldn't do anything else. I was wiped out. I knew my energy was being drained. I didn't know why or how, but I knew it was connected to working with more than 2 schizophrenics a day. And even 2, sometimes I'd spend a couple hours, 2, 3 hours with them, because I was so fascinated in what the voices were saying. So I found that the voices were running patterns, and I'm kind of going, okay, if they're running patterns, then let's disrupt those patterns and see what happens. And those patterns were all negative. You know, they were always telling the person something bad about themselves, something bad about others. They were always bringing up bad stuff and throwing it in their face, and constantly it was always negative. And at night it was nightmares. So they were under attack, and you know, they knew it, they sensed it. So the critical part is to break off or get the patient to realize that those voices are not them. They're not their thoughts. They don't belong to them. You know, they're coming in from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. How do you do that though? How do you get someone to realize that that's not really their own thoughts?
Well, one of the ways would be, did you ever do anything that the voices told you to do and got yourself in trouble? And they go, well, yeah, lots of times. I'm going, well, was it your intent that you get in trouble, or was it theirs? Susan, was it your intent? And they go, no, it wasn't my intent. So one way is to look at the intent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the other thing is to point out patterns. They have got to realize that these voices are not who they are. You know, that they're a separate entity. They're coming in, they're inserting these negative thoughts into their head to generate negative emotional energy, which is what they feed off of.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you won't find a schizophrenic who says, hey, the voices just attacked me, and have any energy left to go out and walk. I mean, they are drained completely dry. And a lot of times they can't even get out of bed, they're so drained. You know, and you talk to any of them and you ask them, how do you feel after the voices attack? How do you feel when they leave? You know, it's like drained. They're just totally drained. I have no idea how they do this. It's consistent.
Yeah, and it sounds like what Robert Monroe had talked about too, you know, when he did his astral projecting experiments at his Monroe Institute, he saw these things in the astral plane that were actually, you know, attaching to people, and
Yes.
they were feeding off of the loosh that
Yes.
the person emitted, which was the energy force, the life force, I guess.
But they have to turn it negative before they can use it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so one thing they do have, and I've been told this by a number of patients, is they have complete access to your memory. They can go in there and they can pull up whatever you're ashamed of, whatever you're feeling guilty about, whatever bad thing you've ever done, and they can pull that up and throw it in your face, and they can keep rubbing it there until you finally go, oh God, no, now yeah, I really screwed up. I must be
Mm-hmm.
sore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always negative stuff. And you know, that's only characteristic of the human race. You look at animals, they don't do that.
Mm-mm.
You know, they do. You look at a dog, he does something bad, you yell at him, you whack him, and the next day he forgot it. It's gone, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but humans, so another thing I wanted to make clear is they feeding on us all, not just the schizophrenics. It's the schizophrenics where it's most clear.
Exactly.
But they're hitting us all. So.
Yes, and this is why I wanted to bring you in on this conversation, is so that people can become aware of their own thoughts and start really doing introspection into their own world that is inside their mind and where their thoughts come from. Because I have experienced those archons and that kind of control before. And when I became aware of, you know, in my slow awakening, like everybody else, I had experienced that archontic kind of influence when I was on one of the film productions called Halt and Catch Fire. They called for lunch, and I always took my salad. I eat organic food, and I'm very conscious about what I eat. So when they called for lunch, I'm walking through Video Village, where all of the directors and producers of the show have all of their computers, backpacks, purses, everything, all personal belongings are just there. And I'm walking through this office building that we leased, And I'm just thinking about my salad, I'm in my own head, just kind of like, okay, I'm going to take a nap after I eat. Well, my eyes landed on a backpack that was on one of the director's chairs. And this thought form came into my head and said, you want to take that. And that's at that point, I had already done some research. And I'd already been reading about these thought form entities that can actually influence us. And so I just sort of went laser focus on this thought. And I was like, you got to get out of my head. And no, I am not going to do that. Because when you know yourself, that's when you know that you're not going to be doing these things. And when that kind of thought comes into your head, it can easily influence the people who don't know themselves well. So I feel like that's where the importance comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And all of us are being hit by thoughts like that. I knew probably the most saintly preacher I ever knew who told me one day he was standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and looking down, and all of a sudden he hears a voice in his head say, jump, jump. And I don't know a more saintly person than that.
Mm-hmm.
I've had stuff like that happen to me a number of times. So where this unacceptable thought just blows on in there. And it's like, where did that come from? That doesn't belong to me.
Yeah, exactly.
But it still upsets you,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, okay, now you're upset and they're feeding you. All they had to do was throw that thought in your head,
Looks like we have a question for you, actually.
Fire away.
Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you. Hi, Jerry.
Hi.
In your experiences, did you ever see a pattern in how these entities were allowed access to have such influence over people? And by the way, this is fascinating to me because I worked with criminally insane in some state prisons in California. So I have observed a lot of these behaviors. So this is so interesting to me. Thank you.
Yeah, so you've seen what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
From the surface, even though you didn't know quite. What was your feel when you heard these guys talking to themselves? What was your gut feel?
Well, I've always been fascinated by mental illness in general.
Me too. So that's two of us. We're two oddballs in the same
Exactly.
pod there. Who would be fascinated with mental illness? Tell me who.
Well,
but I am. I mean, I am. So we're on the same wavelength there.
And I wanted to go into your line of work too. So a tad bit envious. But at one point in my job, I was assigned to ensure that these inmates took their medication. It was very interesting because, as you know, they would, try all sorts of tricks to avoid taking the medication. Yeah. So, and I wondered why. And of course, I didn't have access to intel like you did. I would have loved to pick the brains of the psychologists, on board. But I wondered, being, having studied metaphysics my entire life, I always wondered, is there something else that is influencing these guys? And being anti-big pharma, I hated, the abuse of the medicines. So
yeah, here I hate just this must be meant to be, because it was near the top of a stack of papers I got on my desk, and I got to read them this, and I looked, and there it was. So it's meant to be. So this is coming in from a psychologist. She says, I'm about to retire after 30 plus years as a psychologist, and I've done 7 years with the prison system in California. I came to the same conclusions you did, and then she's found my work. I've followed alternative information since the late 80s, so I understand the nature of other dimensions. Just wanted to thank you for taking a stand and speaking out against big pharma and the controlled system, controlled system. So, I've heard that from several psychiatric social workers and counselors. Well, I always suspected, but now you brought some clarity to it. Now, where was I before I got sidetracked on that? I'm all over the place today.
It's okay. No, well, you were talking about your experience in the prison system and how you were discovering, through the patients.
Well,
My
yeah,
main question was, I'm sorry for interrupting. My main question was, did you see a pattern in
Oh.
were there experiences that might have led to them giving permission?
Sorry, I went off and I didn't even answer your question. Yeah,
No problem.
I'm
I'll
bad.
go ahead and mute now.
I apologize. Yes, there was a definite pattern. You know, one of the biggest and quickest was methamphetamine. You know, I've watched more prisoners go psychotic on methamphetamine than virtually any other source except for abuse, but very bad abuse. It's one of the most dangerous drugs out there. The second one is cocaine. So, you know, the pattern with amphetamine is, you know, they get high and then they start hearing the voices while they're high and they go, well, that was just a hallucination. So they come down off the drug, the voices disappear, and they go, oh yeah, that confirms that it was just a hallucination. I got nothing to worry about. So they go back to using the thing, and then, you know, a couple times later, the voices come back, you know, then they go, oh, it's just a hallucination, it'll go away. That happens for a few times, and then one day they don't go away. They're there forever. They don't leave. And that guy is just as psychotic as any of the others in the mental hospital. Same voices. It's almost like it opens up some force in your spiritual armor and allows those things to just pour on through.
Yeah, I wonder if it's something to do with the auric field, you know, our energy force. Because what I've been seeing just with doing the hypnosis that Dolores Cannon, you know, teaches, I have seen that all of the people that come to visit me, I pretty much came to the conclusion that they're all traumatized. Every single one of them have experienced some sort of trauma in their life, and that it appears to be that they are plagued by other entities in various ways.
Is this schizophrenics you're talking about?
No, we are talking about the average human walking around as an abused child or an adult that has suffered some sort of trauma. I'm seeing a lot of indications of such. Like, we've got so much healing work to do on this planet with everyone.
Oh yeah, and the termination of that is the prison, you know, where they ended up. And so, Sue, to finish up your question, yeah, virtually all of the schizophrenics that I worked with in the prison were badly emotionally, sexually, or physically abused as children, you know, or they were using drugs.
Yes.
And so there was that pattern to it.
It just seems, you know, everything works on frequencies, and then that's what we're learning with all of the, you know, Nikola Tesla technology that's going to be coming due pretty soon. I believe they're going to be releasing a lot of things with the breakthrough energy movement that's been working in the background. There's a lot of free energy technologies that are coming, but just knowing that we have been in lower states of consciousness, and that also it coincides with the yuga cycles in the Vedic knowledge. If you go into what they teach in India, and they teach about the different yuga cycles, and we're in the Kali Yuga, which is the lowest cycle, like it's the lowest consciousness state of mankind right now. And it's all a process. It's like with that 26,000 year cycle that happens for each age that comes about, you know, we're going through 26,000 years. Each age is about 2,400 to 2,600 years. And it represents a certain energy frequency. And I'm not sure if it's just exclusively for our growth of soul, or, you know, like we have to have these negative experiences. Now, one thing I will say is that, you know, when I downloaded some information during meditation, it said that you have to know darkness before you can understand your light.
Right.
And so that makes sense to me.
Well, Swedenborg's saying basically the same thing. Is, you know, he says you have two positive guardian angels and you have two demons assigned to you. You know, and you're the one who makes the choice. You know, they're both pulling, and the further you choose in one direction or the other, the deeper you go. And, you know, in scuba diving, there's something they call the crush depth, where the water crushes your lungs so far down that your buoyancy goes, and then you just go pop, you just drop like a rock. And that's what the schizophrenics do. Past a certain point, if they can get the voices where you can't reach the person anymore, that person's gone.
Mhm.
You know, now, the only real use for those medications is you can reach those people with the medications temporarily because it calms them down. You know, and that's the only reason those medicines work. It calms them down. The voices need to jack them up and have them fearful, anxiety prone, generating as much negative energy as they possibly could. Those voices, the medications interfere with it. It calms them down. They can sleep again. So the voices or archons are losing ground on that. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're beating the crap out of those psychiatrists, because all those psychiatrists were really doing was pushing drugs.
Yeah.
And those drugs were interfering with what the voices wanted to accomplish. But you know, when you talk about frequency, you know, they one of their things that the psychiatric mafia claims is that there's a genetic predisposition. There's not. I mean, there's not. I think what there is, though, like you were talking, is if the parents are on a negative frequency, they will tune the kid to that same negative frequency. And if one of them is a schizophrenic, they will treat that kid in a manner that they will become schizophrenic also. And I've talked to a couple of guys who turned out normal, but they said for a while while they were living with their mothers, they had to get out of there because they were starting to hear voices also.
Wow.
You know, so that was some confirmation that that's indeed what was going on. You know, and they both kind of despised their mothers. But yeah, there's patterns that run all through this, but you know, the psychiatric mafia doesn't want to look at patterns.
No, I mean, you know, it's all about testing. You know, what can they test on these people? What can they achieve for their own goals by using these test subjects? And you know, I do know that everything is shifting and changing. You know, we can see it in front of us right now. Everything, like the old ways are dying, and this new world is coming to fruition. It's slowly emerging.
Well, I think one of the things we got to do is reform this mental health system, because it's just a big merry-go-round. It's a drug-fueled merry-go-round. I don't know if any of you guys spend any times in any of the psychiatric hospitals, private or public. It's a big drug-fueled merry-go-round. They just, you know, these guys come in, they give them their drugs, they get on the drugs, they get back, and they're kind of give the illusion of being somewhat normal for a while, and then they go off their drugs again, and then they come through the cycle again. Each time, the psychiatric hospitals are milking thousands of dollars out of insurance companies and the parents of these people. I mean, it's like a giant vacuum cleaner. You know? And at the same time, they're poisoning these people with their drugs, and not even telling them how dangerous these things are. You know, well, you got to take them for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's horrible, but I mean, we're seeing that even now, you know, with the things we're dealing with today with the vaccines and stuff. But I want you to tell our members about the experience that you had with the one patient that came into your office and the electrical static that was going up the wall.
Okay, that came about after I fully realized that these things were running repeatable, predictable patterns. And I'm going, okay, they're running those tight patterns, then we need to break up those patterns. So I started experimenting with different things to break up those patterns. And this went on for years. What broke them up the best? You know, what worked the best? Try this, come back next week, tell me how it worked. So it was, you know, kind of all these little experiments with, you know, there wasn't any medications or anything like that. It was just, oh, try this and see if this breaks up the patterns. When we've got good enough at it, one after another, that little group I had would come in and say, the voices are getting really pissed off with you. They're really getting pissed with what you're doing, you know. And I'll go, well, tough beans, you know. And it was one after the other after the other. And I'm like, well, why would a hallucination get pissed off? But I still wasn't willing to think. I still was thinking it was some part of their subconscious. It wasn't something separate. You know, I was denying what I was seeing. For years, my denial system was slowly, piece by piece, being picked to pieces and was getting more and more unstable. but I was still propping it up where I could. And so one day, one of the guys I've been working with for 6 months, as he leaves the office, he turns around and he goes, "You know what you're doing is dangerous, don't you?" And I look at him and I'm like, "What?" They're in your head. They're not my head. I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. I don't see anything. I don't see it dangerous. I haven't pissed anybody off. Nobody's attacked me yet. But it struck me as odd. It's like, why would he turn around and tell me that? Then he comes in a few weeks later. I didn't back off. We were still working together. And he comes to my door in my office without a pass, knocks on the door, and I open it and he goes, "The voices want to talk to you." I'm like, "What?" "What? The voices, you come here, the voices want to talk to me." "Yeah, they want to talk to you." I'm like, "Okay." Because that never happened before. It was always, the voices would say something and the patient would tell me what they were saying. And then I'd tell the patient, tell the voices to go stick their head in the toilet. And then the voices would come back and go, "You're a stupid asshole." And it went like that. And it always went through the patient. This time they wanted to speak direct. And so I said, "Well, come on in, sit down." And after we sat down, I'm like looking at him like, "Well, what do they have to say?" And these words came out of his mouth. "You have no right to interfere with our way of life." And I'm just sitting there staring at him like, "What? Our way of life, plural?" That wasn't the guy talking, And then I'm going, I just was stunned. It's like, and then said something, "Well, you have no right to destroy these people." And then it got into whatever. And at some point, I think I had something I wanted to show the voices, and I pulled something up, and it said, "Tell them what this looks like," or something like that. And he said they can see it. They can see through my eyes. They hear through my ears. And I'm like, that was another one. So here's my denial system. The more sticks are being pulled out all the time. And it was, I think at the point it broke was where they came through and said, "You have no right to interfere with our way of life." Because I shut my door and I just was staring out the window all day, like, what am I getting myself into? What is going on here? And, I couldn't tell anybody about this. There's nobody to talk to. So I just sat there like, stunned. And, but I didn't stop working with that guy. So I was reading a book by Miguel Ruiz, who's a South American shaman, and he was talking about spirit entities that seemed to match what the voices, schizophrenic voices, were doing to these people. He was talking about them also being energy parasites. So I'm like, I wonder if he's talking about the same thing. And he was bringing up the factors that they were energetic parasites. So I brought that book in, and I brought the same guy in whose voices had warned me. And I outlined a paragraph. And I said, brought him in, I said, "I'm going to read you a paragraph here from the shaman. I think he's talking about your voices. Tell me what you think." Because I was always doing stuff like that. I'd find something, I'd read it, I'd bring it into them. "What do you think of this? What do the voices think of this? How do the voices react to this?" So it was constantly trying to pull information out of them and trying to piece this giant puzzle together. Like I'd have one piece that I knew was significant, but I didn't know where it fit or where it belonged, but I knew it belonged into this anomaly somewhere. So it was like trying to solve this giant psychological puzzle that was just all over the place. I'd have a piece here, and then I'd find another piece and throw that in, and then it started coming together here. And I was like obsessed with it. And I was so sick of it that when I went to graduate school, when I left Milledgeville, I was like, "Thank God I'm getting away from the schizophrenics. I'm like, finally some time away from them," because it was like they were frustrating me and driving me crazy. And it was like, I didn't know what made them tick, and I only had pieces of the puzzle, and I couldn't talk to anybody about those pieces. And so, when I got back out of graduate school again and ended up back in Tucson working in ER doing psych crisis. Here comes the schizophrenics again. And so it's like, well, you're not done yet. So I read him that I started reading him that thing about what the shaman said. And as soon as he got into talking about these entities being energetic parasites, all of a sudden behind my head, this crackle exploded. It sounded just like an arc welder. It's like crack, 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 crack. And I'm like, what the hell? I turn around and it starts crawling up the wall to my right. It's like crack, 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 crack. And I look at him and he's just staring at me with this. I'm like, what's going on with that? You know, so I'm like, I think he may attack. So I push my chair against the wall and get ready to kick him back if he shows up, if he comes at me. And I'm trying to watch his crackling while trying to keep an eye on him because he's looking mighty weird to me. And it's like crack, crack, crack. And then it starts across the ceiling at the back of the room, but I could see him clearly because he's under the crackling. So I could keep an eye on him at the same time. There was no smell, there was no taste, there was no burn marks, there was nothing. It was just a crack, you know, and I'm like, and it went on forever. I mean, it just seemed like it was going on forever. It was I think realistically it was probably 20 seconds, but it just seemed like it lasted forever. And looking at this weird whatever, and I couldn't even see it, but I could hear it. And I'm trying to keep an eye on him, and it's like the Twilight Zone. I'm like,
Yeah.
and my mind's going like, what the
Yeah, you're like,
what's going on here, man? You know, and it's like there's no explanation for any of it. There's no explanation for him sitting there looking like a zombie. There's no explanation for this weirdness going on the ceiling. You know, I'm sitting there and I'm trying to track this thing, and I see nothing. The only thing I do is hear it, and it was loud. So it comes down the wall and it jumps into this Rubbermaid trash can right next to my leg. And I look down there, and there's nothing friggin' there. There's nothing there. It's an empty plastic bag. The thing had been cleaned the day before. And then all of a sudden it stops. It just dead stops. And I look up at him and he's slowly getting up. And he goes, I gotta leave. Go, get the hell out of here, quick, back, let me open the door for you. I was like, whew. And that did it. I mean, I closed the office and I just stared out the window the rest of the day. Because if they could do that, if they could affect physical reality in that way, then what else could they do? And what the hell was I getting into?
mm-hmm. Yeah,
You know,
yeah. It's
but before he left, you know, as he went to the that thing meeting, I finally called him back 2 months later, and I asked him. I said, "Did you hear that crackling when you were in my office the last time?" I was so afraid of this guy that it was 2 to 3 months before I called him back, before my curiosity overcame my fear. And he comes in and he looked good. I thought he'd be a wreck. You know, if the voices had that much control over him where he walks out like a zombie, I thought he'd be a wreck. No, he looked good. And I'm like, you look good. Because I was expecting him to be a wreck. And he goes, yeah, I've been doing what you told me to do, and I'm keeping him down. I'm keeping him down. But he wasn't trying to get rid of him. He was just keeping him down.
oh wow.
But he was able to function. And, you know, he said, yeah, I heard those cracks, but I was surprised you did. And I said, what the hell was that? He said, well, that was them. And I said, them who? He said, the voices. That was the voices. He goes, yeah, that was them. I said, what the devil they were trying to do? He said, they were trying to scare you off. I said, I think they did a damn good job of it, you know. And I remember I asked him, I said, you look pretty strange when you got up and left my office then. What were the voices telling you then? And he said, they were telling me to go get a shank and stick it in your belly. And I was thinking, he wouldn't do that. I've worked with him for 6 months. He's a pretty decent guy. He's kind of been compliant. And I asked him, I said, well, why didn't you do it? He said, I couldn't find one. So I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, we have another question from Sue, actually. So
Okay,
go ahead,
fire
Sue.
away.
Jerry, have you ever discovered any form of treatment that would mitigate the effects of the voices? or
Oh,
their
yeah.
influence?
Anything you can do that can break up those voices, the person will improve. So one of the biggest things Sherry, my co-author, found, she was hearing voices when she was a young gal, and she got rid of them on her own. You know, and figured out how to do it. And she came up with, if you go to our website, jerrymarzinsky.com, there's a free program on there under articles. It's called the That's a Lie program. So 98% of what these voices tell people are lies. I mean, they're just whatever lie will get them upset.
Mhm.
So anything that the voices say and any thought that you have from that, I don't know where my phone's reading. Let me get rid of that. Any negative thought you have about yourself or anybody else, that's them putting that in your head, putting that thought in your head. That's not you.
Thank you.
So these patterns they run is they try to convince the psychotic patient of all these lies. The people are chasing them, people are hating them, they're talking behind their back. This guy, you know, turned left and that meant he was going to die or something like that. So Sherry found when she countered these with that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie, that's a lie. That broke that up. But knowing that they weren't lying, and even when I was working at Milledgeville and these guys were getting in trouble, I'd say, well, why did you do that? You know, why did you throw a wrench or why did you cuss at your instructor? And, you know, they were exploding and getting themselves into trouble. That's what these guys, these voices want. They want the person in trouble so that they can get them locked into a prison. That will generate negative emotional energy for years. You know, all they got to do is get them to act up and do something crazy just to get them thrown in prison. And then that's such a negative environment. It's like no good deed in there goes unpunished. I guarantee it. You can't virtually do anything good to try to help those guys where they don't wipe it out sooner or later. They want to put the persona on there as if they're doing something to help these people, but they're doing very little, very little. They're just basically a holding tank, you know, and it's a hell of a holding tank.
Yeah, I mean, these people are just basically like vessels for these negative entities. And so we had some concerns with some of our, one of our members was asking, you know, about the med beds and things. And certainly we want to talk about the other possibilities that are coming, you know, in the future to help people. But with what you're experienced with in all of this with the schizophrenics, these people, even the members and everybody out here in society today, we're all affected by these thought forms at some point in our journey. I know that I have experienced them, and you know, with anyone out here that might be doing and acting upon dark acts, they may be influenced by these archons and these hidden entities as well. So we want to also get to the solutions, because that's where, you know, we can actually implement and take the knowledge that we learn in our journey of exploring this existence and apply anything that we've learned to actually help others or ourselves, you know, to be aware. And that's basically this whole event that we're having right now tonight. This discussion is about raising awareness.
Well, it's all a big spiritual battle. So that's what the
Yes.
schizophrenics are facing. It's a spiritual battle. You know, they either start moving in the right direction,
Yes.
or these things are going to suck them right down.
And it's just, that's just one more faction of the battlefield that we are experiencing here in this existence, though. And that's when the main point of us even having this conversation is to enlighten others as to these possibilities of what's really happening. Because I know, you know, it's crazy to some people who haven't ever heard of the archons or don't really experience these entities because they're not really in tune with their own thoughts. But I have found that this is a reality with my own life, and then experiencing what others, you know, along my path have experienced. It just falls right in line with what we're discussing right now.
I'll tell you what I can say is that, you know, I follow Simon and all these alternative news things. What the deep state is telling us right now matches exactly what the psychotic voices are telling the psychotics. It's the same kind of stuff, be fearful, be afraid,
Exactly.
don't trust anybody, you're going to be killed. Look at all the negative stuff that is being broadcast daily over the mainstream media. You're going to die. These many people were shot. Everything's getting unstable. Food price, everything, all this negativity. Look at it. It's just fomenting paranoia.
Yes.
And the messages they're giving to all of us are the same thing. They're the same exact messages that the schizophrenics are getting from the psychotic voices. The same thing.
So it's got to be related, because everything here, nothing is separate here. That's what another point we need to make is nothing in this plane of existence acts as separately as its own, device or entity or event. Everything is connected. And so we have to start thinking about how to connect the dots with the similarities of all of the experiences that we're seeing. And with all of the negativity that's being generated out here in the world, we know that we're the ones who are the light bringers and bringing the solutions and the help. But to arm each person in this room right now watching this video, we're arming them right now with more knowledge to go out and help others. And that is the whole point of having this whole dialogue, and just appreciating your research, that you've discovered this and that you are certified, like you're an official, and you're out here putting it out to the world openly and willingly, just trying to help in your own way. And that's where I, want to show my appreciation for you.
Thank you. But look at all the bull crap I had to go through just to get access to the psychiatric population.
Yes.
So, Sue, just to get there.
Yes.
Just to get in there and start asking questions.
Exactly.
4 years of undergraduate psychology, and then another 2 years and a master's degree, and that's just minimum to get in there. And I got to thank the University of Georgia for letting me go through their graduate school. It was the best experience I've ever had as far as education. I'll be forever indebted to them, the vocational rehabilitation people out there. Because I was a rabble rouser, right? They didn't have to let me in. I always was hitting them with questions that was irritating, because, like you, Sue, I was like fascinated. What more do you know? What more do you know? And what I found is not a lot of the academics spent much time on the front lines. At the very best, they might have worked in a university counseling center, but to be on the actual front line is a totally different experience than working in the university counseling center.
Exactly. I mean, there's not many people that are just out there putting it out like you are. Now, I have come across some other researchers, and especially that book about the, the entity removals. It says spirit. I should have brought the book over here. I showed it to you last time in the video, but that was spirit releasement therapy.
Yeah, I got it.
That book is amazing. So it's got a lot of solutions in there to assisting with this process. And a lot of it's through hypnosis. And there's other things as well. But what would you say are your top 3 choices for helping alleviate someone from this entity attachment?
Let me see, what was I going to say before that was important? I spaced it out. Well, the top 3, they have to be willing. They have to want to get rid of the voices. And I had one patient in the prison. We finally got rid of it. He used to be a stock market guy working on Wall Street. And he ended up in prison because of cocaine. We got rid of his voices. He said the silence is deafening when they left. And then he was lonely, because he was always talking to his voices. They were like his nasty friends, And by the time I was transferred off that unit, I went and checked with him from some other unit I was on. They checked and, well, how you doing? And he goes, well, I got them back. I was lonely. So he called them back. If they don't want to get rid of the voices, then there's nothing you can do. And, the second thing is they have to realize that these are not who they are. The voices are separate. They're separate entities, and that they're parasitic entities. And that's the last thing that the voices want their victim to know. If you had a leech on you, you know, that leech isn't going to want you to know that he's there sucking your blood. You know, it's because once you're aware, you're not going to let that thing stay there. So they go crazy when you go to tell the patient that these things are parasitic entities. The voices go nuts. They go absolutely nuts. So they have to be able to make this distinction between who they are and what the voices are. And then they have to be moving in a positive spiritual direction. So we got that's a live program. They have to break those things up. They have to stay away from all negative influences. They can't let themselves be isolated. What is that? What was the book where they wrote about the loosh?
I don't remember which one. It's in Robert Monroe's research.
Well, Monroe does too, but there was one fellow who wrote an entire book about it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's what they're doing. They're parasitic entities. So you have to watch your thoughts, you know, and I'm constantly fighting with that. You know, I kind of be sitting around and sitting out front on the front porch and start thinking about something, and you know, it spins off and then it lands, and I'm going, well, where did that get you? Well, that was really stupid. You spend all that time thinking about this bullcrap that's, you know, fictional. It's not even going to happen. It's probably never going to happen, and you just spent round and round and you did that. You know, try to stay in the present.
Yes.
You know, because these things are constantly injecting ideas into your head. You know, and check out those ideas against your intent. When you're usually the good voices don't speak in language. They speak in feeling and intuition, and they'll kind of like tug you in one way or the other. These things will jump in and they'll tell you what to do, and you know, they'll try to make you feel like their ego is one of the big hits. It's one of the big things they hook into. So they're like fishermen. What they bait the hook. They know all the crap that you have going on in your head. They'll cast their hook and see if you'll bite on it. And if you bite on it, they'll reel you in down to pour gasoline on the fire. So they have complete access to your memory. You can pull up any of the bad crap that you've ever done and reel it in, and then go, yeah, you did this, look at that. And go, yeah, I did do it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. So one of my hypnosis sessions, my client was talking about how the archons can actually, like, they know everything about your alpha, your beta, your theta, your delta, all your states of awareness and being. They know absolutely everything about it, and they can manipulate it and control it for their benefit, which I found interesting, because this person didn't know anything about archons, but you know, under that level of hypnosis, I was asking questions about the archons, and they just disseminated this from the ethers, you know, from, I guess, the Akashic records. I found that just amazing.
Yeah, what verifies that even is they've done experiments with people who hear voices. So they hooked an EEG machine to their head, and they found out that a split second before they heard that voice, there was a consistent registration on the EKG machine.
Interesting.
So there was an electrical impulse that fired before the person realized that the voice had spoken to them. So
Now,
it's almost like we're radio. The brain is a radio set, and here's all these different channels.
Yes,
and the voices are coming through on this particular frequency and trying to overrun the other frequencies.
Exactly. And so, yeah, we are like, we're like a radio, and you can tune in to different frequencies. But that makes me wonder too about the voice of God technology that the government has. Like, where does that also play into a lot of what people experience out here in the world, because supposedly, now I remember this, I remember going down to Orlando and I would take the turnpike to go there. And at some of the exits on the turnpike, they had a dome inside there. It was like a little kiosk where you could listen to music. And so there was like the satellite dish thing that if you got underneath it, you could hear the music. But if you stepped right outside of the border of it, you couldn't hear the music at all. And I was like, whoa, it's like, that's the technology we have. But then the military uses voice of God technology to beam thoughts and things into people's heads. Now, I haven't heard much else about that technology and where they're using it.
Well, I haven't, I mean, I've heard of it. I believe it exists. One thing I worry about is putting out the patterns that the actual psychotic voices run, and those guys getting hold of it and then mimicking that. But the alternative is not to tell anything to anybody.
Yeah.
So it's a risk that I have to take. I don't know what the voice of God technology tells those people. I've never run into anybody who's experienced it. And of course, the voices they're taking full advantage of that. I've had several patients where they go, well, this is the voice of God. It's the government. There's nothing I can do about it. It's the government. They're doing this. And once they buy into that there's nothing they can do about it and that it's a government, they're gone.
Yeah.
They have to take responsibility for their own mental state. And if they're putting it on the government or whoever's broadcasting and not taking responsibility and trying to fight back, they have to fight back. We all have to fight back.
Exactly. I mean, it's like free will, everything about this existence is your own free will and what choices you want to make for your own experience. And, especially with people who have addictions, it's really up to them and their willpower as to whether they want to come off of that or not. But I personally have people in my life now that have these archonic experiences, and these archons have got a hold of them and they won't let go. And so I've offered suggestions. I'm like, hey, come for a free hypnosis session. I want to help you with these things. And one of my friends did come and I did the session. And after 30 days, she was clean, like no problems, nothing. She was on a beautiful path. But I told her, I said, you got to keep coming consistently. After 30 days, it was off the hook. She was gone again. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're not going to be consistent with me, then
Well, what did you do? What did you do to drive the voices out?
I poured love and light, and also
they hate that. They hate
exactly.
that.
But the love and light, and then also what's fascinating about that whole thing is I did a body scan and I found out where the link was for where this thing was attached. And she's one of the second people that said she had an attachment in her stomach.
I usually find them behind the neck, in the back of the head.
Oh, yeah. But this one, she felt something in her stomach. And I was like, well, let's really examine the stomach. Let's talk to the stomach. Let's see what's there, doing all this process. And the next thing you know, when I release it and, put love and light and all this stuff with it, she physically felt something leave. So I really think she's got multiple entities attached to her that are
I can tell you, they hate love. They hate anything religious. If you can send them love, it's like pouring acid on them.
Exactly. And then you were talking about how, which Bible verse is it that when
The 23rd, they hated it. They said it was like one patient described it, repeating the 23rd Psalm. It's like the voices reacted like worms thrown onto a hot frying pan.
Wow.
And I heard that from other, not just one, but they hated it. So when I started off, it was with a rubber band that you snapped the rubber band, and that hurt the voices more than the patient, and then repeated the 23rd Psalm. That was the first thing that I tried that actually had an impact on the voices. It shut them up for a long enough period of time, because it's such a slippery mental state. They just go from one state to the other, from one negative thing to the other. When the person realizes they're active, if they snap that rubber band hard and it stings them, the reports I got is that it hurts the voices much more than it hurts the person. And then they shut up, and then they can repeat the 23rd Psalm and hit them back. Now that doesn't get rid of them, but they know that they're like slapping the voices in the face. You know,
Interesting.
it's like the first thing they can do to start hitting back at the voices, because it's a battle and they have to fight it. You know, if I can get rid of them for short periods of time with stuff that I do, but if the patient doesn't follow through, like what you were saying, and keep doing what they're supposed to do, moving up a positive spiritual path, they will be back, and they'll be back with reinforcements.
Exactly.
Just like the Bible said, you know, you clean the house and you don't refill it. These things will come back with buddies, and that's exactly what happens.
Mhm. And then also you were talking about what the 963 hertz, is it 963 hertz frequency, sound
It
frequency?
was either 963 or 369.
I think it was 963. It's really high. I remember it began with 9. I don't know if it was 936, but I think it was.
No, it was either 963 or 369.
I think it's 963.
But they call it the God frequency.
Okay.
Now that I only got one report from one fella who said that the voices hate that frequency.
Oh, interesting.
You know, he said it kind of drowns them out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of stuff to test out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now we got a hearing voices group with over 600 people who hear voices in there, but I can't get anything out of them. I'll put up a survey and they ignore it. One or two of them will respond. It's like, you know, I wish I could get them, you know, like, hey, try this, try that, but they don't listen. You know, so all I can do is just kind of try to keep moving in the right direction. I mean, they know the answer is there, but they're the ones that have to find it and use it. We're giving them the information.
You know, and what about drinking programmed water, for example? We all know about holy water, but holy water is holy because it has been blessed. But we can all do this too. What we found with you know, Dr. Masaru Emoto's consciousness of water research is that our thoughts program water.
Yes.
And so what if we had, you know, a really powerful group of people who were praying over a gallon of water, and then you serve it to people who have the voices? I wonder if so, like the physical could actually have some sort of effect on something that is non-physical, you know?
Well, you know, that's the kind of experiment I would try out.
I would love to experiment. I'm always about experiments.
The thing is, look what they do to try to, you can't take that and try it on schizophrenics because you can't access the population. They're not going to let you. They got them sealed up in the mental health clinics and hospitals. And oh no, this is medical, man. You can't come in here and just do anything here. This is you know, so you know, you got to jump through all these freaking hoops like I did just to get access to the friggin' population where you can start asking them some questions.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, we, you know, after you know 6 years of higher education, we deem you sufficiently programmed to be able to go in there and carry out what we told you, which was nothing that was working.
Exactly.
Now, if it doesn't work, what good is it? You know, and nothing they were doing was working. It was just putting Band-Aids on sores, you know, and at the same time poisoning these people with their psychotropic meds.
Yeah, I mean, they did a real good job at creating a society full of drones, pretty much. But what this is what we're here for, though. This is a great awakening. Like, we're here for the solutions for humanity, you know, and helping each other. And I believe through having people like you and anyone else who is out here who's actually had these experiences, you know, whatever it may be, and is figuring out what the solutions are, sharing the information is the most important thing we can do right now to help the population as we move forward into the future. Because there's going to be many, many methods of healing that are coming our way in the near future, not far off in a galaxy somewhere, but very soon we're going to see amazing feats of discovery that are being released to the population. Because I'm not sure if you're familiar with the breakthrough energy movement, but
med beds.
Well, it's not just med beds. We've got all kinds of inventions to solve all kinds of problems.
Cure for cancer that they wouldn't let out.
Exactly. And to get us off of the power grid, free energy technology, all this stuff is just, it's about to be burst and let loose on the world.
I wish they'd hurry up.
Oh, believe me, you and me both, but
I think one of the things that has to be done with the mental health system is that a spiritual aspect has to be put in there. It has to be, because we're spiritual beings.
Exactly.
We're not bodies. And they're just, psychiatry is thinking, oh, well, it's the brain and the body. So we'll drug the brain, and that's what you're supposed to do, drug the brain. So they don't. Yeah. In 8 years of 4 years of graduate school, 4 years of undergrad, they never brought up spirituality, ever.
No.
They never considered the human being a spiritual being. And
Well,
that's a bad mistake. It's a very bad mistake.
well, they separated it all. They divided science and spirituality and everything.
It
If
doesn't
you
work
look-
that way.
If you look at everything in our world, it's compartmentalized,
Yes.
but
Yep.
it's by design.
And that's an artificial split, that is.
Yes.
So
But it's to keep people from learning the truth, because once you learn the truth and you start connecting all these dots of spirituality and science and all this idea of us actually just having a physical experience, and it just, things start to actually make sense, which is also interesting, Yeah. So let me see does anybody else have any questions? Any of our members have any questions for Jerry? We got people talking about things in the chat. Okay, Renee, do you have your camera? Can you turn on your camera? There you go.
Yes, here I go. Here I am. Yes, I'm wondering, I in the chat, I was asking about late onset schizophrenia versus schizophrenia. Is there a difference?
I haven't. The first thing that comes to mind is sundowner syndrome. When I was working with geriatrics, it was very strange that at sundown, they started getting crazy. They started getting psychotic. And that's the same thing with the voices. They attack stronger after sunset. And it's strongest at 3 a.m.
Wow.
And I don't know why that is, but it is. I mean, that they instill nightmares in the schizophrenics, and then they wake up, and then here's the voices start on them. So it's like 24-hour hell. You in your sleep they're getting you, and in their dreams you're getting you, and then you wake up and they're getting you again.
And this is for people who have not been diagnosed ever with schizophrenia, but as they age, 80, like 81, my mother, well, actually it started a couple of years ago, but so
After sunset, she started getting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what they call sundowner syndrome. And what they'll do is they'll dump the same kind of meds on her that they do on, the schizophrenics.
Well,
and it'll gork her out. I mean, she'll be sitting around going, she won't be causing any trouble though.
she has Seroquel, and it helps her
They've
to
already done it.
Yeah, she had to sleep. She wasn't getting any sleep, and it just made it worse. So,
Right.
The medicine actually helped her.
Yes. And with the geriatrics, like at that stage, there's not a whole lot more you could do.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I'm not saying the medicines aren't important. They're important because there's a lot of these guys you won't be able to reach unless they are medicated. The voices will just drive them away from you, or they'll be so loud they won't even let you talk to them. They have to be sedated enough to where you can reach them. And without those meds, in a lot of cases, you won't be able to reach them. But to keep them on those meds for long periods of time is destroying their brains. And they know this. I mean, they know this. And they do it anyway.
What
Okay,
about
thank you.
music? I'm sorry. What about music, like different types, classical music, or even like I listen to meditation radio, for example, and it's a lot different from mainstream.
Yeah, they won't like that. What they want is acid rock. They want this rapper stuff. That's what they want. So kill, beat, da da da, the Whitey's, whatever that I can't
Mhm.
even make out what they're saying in that.
Yes,
that
exactly.
rap crap. But that's what they want to steer the person to. And they want to stir them to these violent war games, these violent video games, anything to promotes violence and discord and fighting. They're going to try to, they ought to ban those videos. They ought to just put those companies out of business, those war companies, those killing, murder kind of
Yes.
things. And that ought to be illegal.
Well, Hollywood runs all of that, and it goes really, really deep. The rabbit hole's very deep. But Hollywood and the video games and the music, they're all combined. It's all part of the same beast. But for Renee's mother, for example, what do you think? Maybe playing some metaphysical music, like meditation radio, soft music, and classical, and like the classical, Beethoven and things of this nature, like higher frequency type of music, could help her mother?
Renee, did she say she was hearing voices, or she just got more upset after sunset?
Voices, sounds,
Oh.
the neighbor, a paranoia, neighbors were doing things on purpose to agitate her.
See,
Stuff
that's
like
where
that.
that's where the That's Alive program would come in.
Mm.
It's on our website. I was saying.
What
go
is
to-
that?
That's a program we have for that.
Okay.
It's free. You can get it off our website at jerrymarzinsky.com. Go under articles, pull up the That's Alive program, and get her to
Okay.
use it. Because what
All
they're
right.
doing is they're telling her a series of lies, and she has to respond back. That's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie.
Okay. Thank you.
She has to realize they're not her. The voices are not who she is. They're invaders.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So Jerry, when you were working, side by side with other therapists, did they know about your research?
No, I couldn't tell them. They believed the voices were hallucinations. And
Mm.
anybody who didn't believe that wasn't part of the in crowd.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I couldn't talk to them about anything. Matter of fact, when the patients I was working with at the state prison started recovering, fully recovering,
Mhm.
I was put under investigation
Oh,
because that
wow.
wasn't supposed to happen. They would go off their meds, but yet they would stay stable. And then they started watching me, and they saw that I was spending a lot more time in sessions with these guys than the average. Those guys could only handle them for about maybe 20 minutes, and then they'd scoot them away because they didn't know what was going on with them. They didn't know what to tell them. They
Mhm.
felt that their voices were hallucinations. The schizophrenics weren't going to tell them anything, and they weren't going to tell the schizophrenic anything that they were going to listen to. So it was like, okay, you're not hurting anybody. You're not thinking about killing yourself. Fine, go on your way. But when I started picking into their heads, it became really, really fascinating. It became
Mhm.
very interesting.
And
But
then,
I was put under investigation, and then they started questioning these guys that had recovered, and they knew what they were doing. The prisoners knew what they were doing, and they didn't tell them anything. They said he's helping us, and there was one guy they questioned. They had a valid MMPI on it that showed he was psychotic as a bedbug when he entered the prison. So they asked him, what are you doing in there with him? And he said, he's helping us, not like you, asshole. And boy, he could have gone all day without doing that. That was like pouring gas on the fire. So the investigator said, would you be willing to take another MMPI? He said, yeah, I'll take another MMPI. So he took it. It was a valid profile, and he wasn't psychotic. He was, by their gold cup instrument, the guy was no longer psychotic, and both were valid profiles.
Hmm.
So, I ended up in front of the medical director with him demanding to know what I was doing.
Mhm.
Or at least the chief psychologist saying he's doing something weird. He's doing something weird, and trying to get me to talk about it. And it was interesting because when I was scheduled for this inquisition, all these Christian fellow workers came up and they said, well, don't give them any more information than you need to. Keep your mouth shut. Get out of there as soon as possible. Don't carry on any conversation. Yes or no answers the best you can. And then get out of there as quickly as you can, because it was like a trap. It was like they were trying to get me to talk, and there's no way to convince these guys of anything. There was nobody I could talk to about what was happening during these times for years until I met Sherry. And I'd known Sherry for 10 years before she told me that she was hearing voices when she was a young kid.
Wow.
And then I finally had somebody I could talk to other than the patients who understood. And Sherry's one of the most spiritual people I've ever seen. I mean, it was like she went from there and it was like a slingshot and boom, she's one of the most spiritual people I know, the co-author of our book.
Yes. Well, now what is the difference between, like, how can you tell between the hallucination versus a possession? What's the main difference?
Well, I don't think there's a real big difference. They're both kind of the same. Now with the exorcism, I have my doubt that they work for any length of time, because if the person doesn't change their frequency, I mean, you can turn the radio
Matt,
off,
just checking on you.
but if they don't change their frequency, they're going to be back.
Mhm.
So the voices are kind of a possession. It depends on how deeply it goes. Now, I've seen some patients that were completely possessed. I mean, the voices had taken over. There was one, this guy was a Muslim family, where the guy, they left from California, they left him behind to stay with his girlfriend. He became more and more, the voices got stronger and stronger. Finally, she started getting afraid of him. She sealed herself in the bedroom. And one night she saw him go out at 3 a.m. with a big butcher knife, go out onto the front lawn of the apartment and just start stabbing the lawn with this big butcher knife. Thank God she realized she was in trouble. She locked the door and called the police. But so he had nowhere to go except with his family here in Tucson. His family brought him in because he was telling them he's no longer Joe, he's now, somebody else. And every time they called him by his real name, he got, the voices got angry and threatened to kill them. He even assaulted his father when his father called him by his real name. He said, I'm not Joe Blow, I'm Ben Bisflick, And he then told his parents, he said, this is my house, I want you all out of here. He attacked his brother. They finally brought him down to me. He was one that was completely controlled. He was doing pretty much what they told him to. And all these murders, with these shootings that we see them kill a bunch of people, a lot of those guys are hearing voices. Our mental health system is a complete friggin' failure. It's a drug-fueled merry-go-round where the pharmaceutical industry is draining all of us, because all of our insurance companies are having to pay for this nonsense that they're perpetuating upon the public.
Exactly.
Virtually none of those drugs are curing anything. They're just putting patches on them. Unless they put a spiritual component to their treatment, it's not going to work.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's where your work is very important. Victoria, can you please mute your microphone?
I think we ought to be looking a little closer at what the shaman's been doing for thousands of years.
Yes.
And take that into consideration. But I know a professor in Turkey who wrote a paper on that, suggested that very same thing. And he was attacked from his colleagues up and down and all around. The ivory tower just jumped down his throat like, friggin' blasted him all over the place, going, how could you even publish something like that? So that's how far off they are. They're up in their ivory tower swinging around in their oxygen mask, totally out of touch with what's going on the front line.
Well, to be honest though, Jerry, what I believe mainstream will start discovering is that these people who have been pulling the strings are dark magicians and
Yes,
are
they are.
dark Kabbalistic manipulators of the rest of us.
They
So
are.
they've been using dark magic to control the rest of us. And that is the crux of what we've been up against. And
Including
magic
these
is
drugs.
yeah, the thing about it is, they made it so mystical and like beyond belief about magic, when really it's the quantum field, which is what science is discovering, now more recently, is that our thoughts create our reality.
Yes.
And our actions and emotions also are a huge generator of that. And that's where the magic comes from. It's free will. And your will is everything in this little meat suit that we call a body. We can actually affect the elements and the elemental forces around us because we have the elements inside our bodies. Now, most people can't fathom this. They can't figure that out. But in my journey of researching all kinds of different topics, this is what I'm discovering, and that's what I feel like this entire world is about. It's about, let's go out here and discover and research what this world is really
and
about.
see, that's where the psychiatric mafia has this all locked up.
Mhm.
They have this big book of, I think it's almost 300 mental disorders that they make up. Every single one of them is made up. They're fabricated.
Yes.
And they put them in this book and they vote on them, and then they say, oh yeah. So they had Southern Bell syndrome, I think, for a while. Mental retardation was considered a mental illness for a while. They just make these things up. And then the insurance companies are, well, yeah, you got to put down this one for this. And they made up this whole system of stuff. And then they make you learn it in school. And it's all a continuum. It's all a continuum.
Mhm. It's perpetuating a lie. We're going into the age of truth, but we've been living in the age of deception, and they've just been perpetuating lies. But with the new frequencies, because I keep up with the science and I keep up with the spiritual realm, the sun, they're always trying to get us fearful of the sun, like, oh, sunspots and sunbursts and this, that, and the other with the sun. But what's really happening is the Schumann resonance has been spiking up out of control, like beyond what we're used to. It's rising, but it's rising in such a way so that it doesn't just eliminate us. And so is the sun and all the other stars that are over us. So, things are going to be revealed, and it's all going to be coming out.
It's coming in like a tidal wave. It's on its way.
I'm loving though. Like I shared that link about the Senate hearing today with you and everyone in the group here about the truth about the whole Corona Wuhan, coming out with the truth about that. I'm like, yeah, here we go. This is snowballing.
Yep. It's on its way. I don't think they can turn it back now. There's too many people awake now.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and it's just gonna be done. Hopefully by the end of the year we'll be over this Wuhan thing, and all the people who were involved will be discovered. But that's another topic of discussion. But yeah, so do we have any more questions for Jerry? Because we're going to be ending our conversation here soon. It's 8 o'clock. And I'd love if anybody has any questions, any comments to make for Jerry. You can raise your hand if you want to ask a question or speak.
I would just like to say thank you.
No, you're more than welcome. And for any of you who want to dig a bit deeper into it, what it was like, it took us 2 years to write this sucker.
That's
Sherry
great.
and I were like, two people chained together with hammers beating each other over the head. But it's got consistently good ratings. I think 4.7 or something on Amazon, and then you can order it from our website too, jerrymarzinsky.com under books. It'll come to you, but it'll come to you pretty quick that way.
Okay, good. Yeah, I guess we'd rather purchase it from you directly. That would be great. Now, Lucinda has a question. Lucinda, can you turn on your camera? Thank you. Go ahead with your question. You have your microphone muted.
She's driving around in her car.
I've been listening to you for like the last 2 hours. That's why I had my video off. But had a good question. He was wondering if when you mentioned earlier in the conversation that when your patients would read the Bible, that's why they wouldn't go to the free ice cream and that when they read the Bible, the voices didn't like it. He wanted to know, did that happen with other religious books, or did you ever have an opportunity, or was it always just
It was most often the schizophrenics, and they broke into 3 categories. If the voices were weak, they would start screaming bloody murder when the person went, well, I'm going to church. and they try to dissuade them from going until they entered the church. And once they entered the church, the weak voices shut up. And this was consistent. If they were moderate strength, the voices would scream all the way there, protest, try to drive the person away and distract them to something else, keep them out of the church. When they got into the church, when the preacher started talking, then they'd kick up and they'd start trying to interfere and block out what he had to say. You know, like, oh, that's stupid. If Jesus could save himself, he couldn't even save himself. What makes you think he's going to save you? And they just mock the preacher and say, what are you even doing here? This is stupid. And so they wouldn't be strong enough to drive him out, but he would have to struggle to listen to what the preacher was saying. If the voices were very strong, you know, as soon as the preacher started speaking, man, they'd bolt up and they would run out of the church. I don't know if you ever saw any of those guys I had. They just get up and bam, they're out of there.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, the voices don't like anything spiritual. They don't like anything positive. They don't like anything religious. They want to drag them down into the muck and keep their minds functioning in a negative manner, only to generate that negative emotional energy, which they feed off of, and then they drain the person. So they do the same thing to the schizophrenics that we do to milk cows. You know, the farmer takes them, puts them out in the pasture, they eat the grass, they make milk. He comes in, he isolates them, and then milks them, and then turns them loose, and they do it over again. And that's exactly what these voices are doing to the schizophrenics. They let them build up the energy, and then they attack them again, and they drain them. And you won't see a schizophrenic with a lot of energy playing tennis or you know, out there jogging. I mean, you just won't see it. They don't have any energy. They're constantly being drained.
So it's kind of like spiritual ticks. It's like,
yeah. That's very interesting. Well, I appreciate you answering my question, and just wanted to say thank you so much for all you've done over the years, because I learned so much today from what you spoke about, and it's just so sad to know that those people had your colleagues listen to you and taken, you know, tried to do what you were doing. But thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed listening to you.
Well, you're more than welcome. I have warm memories of the South and all the antebellum stuff. And again, I'm so appreciative for the University of Georgia letting me in there, because I've always been a rebel and I was always asking them questions, and that wasn't tolerated in the PhD program. I mean, you could ask some amount of questions in the master's, but when you get in the PhD, you know, they took that as a challenge.
wow.
You know, and you go, well, no, that's not what schizophrenics do. That's not what the hallucination. No, yeah, no, we tell you, man. You don't tell us. And so,
Yeah. The ivory tower rules.
Yeah. Brainwashing. You know, they got it locked up, like, you know, they use all this fancy language, you know, all these psychological terms, and you got this whole book of all these disorders and all this level 1, level 2, they make it look like so complicated. It's like what lawyers do with their lawyer work. You can't understand what the frick they're saying. It's the same thing with this. It's almost like they try to obscure the truth with all this horseshit. It's unbelievable. You know? And it doesn't correspond to fixing or helping people hardly at all.
No. Did you have any more questions, Lucinda? You're breaking.
No, that was all. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Right.
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, don't crash your car.
I know. Be careful out there.
Okay, I guess no more questions. We can sign off.
Yeah, is that everybody? We just want to make sure we cover everybody with, if you have a question or comment for Jerry.
This is Dave Rommel. Can you hear me?
Where are you? Can you turn on your camera? Okay, and turn on your microphone, Dave? Oh, there you are.
Anyway, I've done hypnosis too, and scanning the body and finding entities that are present and asking them to leave and getting a little history just like you have. And I was wondering what type of entities are out there that you think that are living or existing from this, from our energies. You talk
Well,
about archons, and then there's attached entities, and then I know there's other entities that are very dark that are floating around that near-death experiencers have talked about, or
yeah,
Robert Monroe's talked about.
right. Yeah, Monroe's work is wonderful. But the three that I've kind of experienced to some degree are these big dark blobs of energy. It's like the smoke that comes out of a diesel car
Mhm,
when he kicks it.
Exactly.
And they can speak. They're very dark, very diabolic. Then there's the shadow people that schizophrenics see. They're three-dimensional shadows. They walk through walls. They're darker than the rest of the room. Often come at night. You can't see them during the daytime. If you turn the light on, they disappear. If the person's in worse shape, you'll see their eyes. They'll see their eyes. They're either red or lime green. And then there's just the hallucinations that people see, of monsters or snakes or that kind of thing, where they actually foment. But yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of evil entities out there. And I was mostly concentrating on the ones that cause schizophrenics, but there's others out there that I've run by in the passing. You can look up shadow people on Google, and they have pictures of them and drawings of them. I don't know what they are. They're not good, but I've never heard of them hurting anybody. They just scare people.
It seems like people are more these entities can attack when something's happened to them that's been traumatic, like in
Yes.
childhood, or if you get depressed, and that's when they really come in and they're able to access us.
That's exactly right. We were talking about that earlier, through very bad physical, sexual, or mental abuse. That breaks down the spiritual protection and allows them in. Amphetamine, we were talking about. Amphetamine will make somebody crazy, permanently if they keep using it, for long periods of time, big doses. Yeah, Monroe talks about some of the entities he met,
Yes.
on his way. So there's a lot of different entities out there. We're not the top of the food chain on this planet.
No.
People need to realize that there are entities feeding off of us.
Mhm.
It's amazing. It's hard to believe. I didn't believe it at first either, but then through the hypnosis, and I've been hypnotized myself, and there was entities that were attached to me, and they came forward and they had names, and they were just spirits that hadn't gone to the light, and that they had been traumatized or were angry for some reason. So it's fascinating. It's just very hard for us to believe because we don't see it, but.
Mhm.
Well, I went through a lot of years of that before my denial system cracked. I had more than enough evidence, that anybody else would have said, yeah, this is what's going on. And I didn't do that. I was like, no, this can't be. This just can't be. This can't be. No, but it was.
Exactly.
And it is.
Thank you, both of you, for bringing this forward, because it's not a subject that's talked about very often.
No. And it
Thank
needs to be.
Yes, exactly. I knew that this would be a very important discussion. I know that, Simon is very spiritual and talks about many different things, but this is one of the things that is not spoken of very frequently among the masses in the spiritual realm. So, I wanted to bring this evidence forward for our members to learn from, because on my own journey, I've learned about these things, and through hypnosis, even, we need to find the answers and the solutions to helping people. We've got an entire planet full of people that have been traumatized.
Yeah, very badly damaged.
They've been damaged. They have entities. We are in a time, it's like a crisis, and there has to be answers. And so through these conversations like we're having right now, that we got to find the solutions. Like, what can we do to help these people who are out here who need our help? And that it's always about the knowledge.
We know what to do. Getting them to accept it's another story.
Yes.
I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is going to come down on this with both feet. they don't want any infringement on their monetary flow, especially since the cure for schizophrenia is free. It's free. They ain't gonna like that.
I think the pharmaceutical days are numbered. I think
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
there's an end date to the pharmaceutical industry at this point. I can just see it coming, whether it's 10 years, 5 years, 20, I don't know, but I do think that this stuff is going to be coming out about the truth about everything. As we go further into the age of Aquarius, it's everything is shifting right now. We're just seeing the destruction of the old age and rebirthing anew. That's all.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting.
It's fascinating to watch, honestly.
Well, you say hi to Simon for me. I watch him all the time.
Oh, great.
He's
Yeah,
one of
we
the
sure
guys
will.
I watch him all the time.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and close this interview then. And thank you
Okay.
so much again, Jerry, for, it's always great to talk to you. I just enjoy speaking with you and hearing your story over and over. I can never
Yeah,
get
I
tired
know.
of it.
That's why I like taking questions, because I'm killing people with the same old stories all the time.
Yeah, no, but it's great because, it's always new ears that are here. Like
Yeah.
these people, and most of the people here, they didn't really know about your work and, about the archons that are out there.
Mhm.
And so the term archons comes from Gnostics and their teachings about
Yeah.
Gnosticism. So
Well, they're the same thing.
exactly.
The voices in them are the same thing. I didn't know that till relatively late. And Sherry's like, you didn't know they were archons? I thought archons were space people. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's like, shame on you.
Well, well, that's just it. There's so much confusion out here with so many different directions to look for information and, questions of what is this, what is that, and what's going on. Well, we're trying to narrow it down just by having this kind of discussion. What are the solutions to all of this that we're experiencing? And that's what we're here for. So thank you again, Jerry, very,
You're
very
more than
much.
welcome.
And
Send me a link when you get it posted.
yes, of course, we
Yeah.
will. We'll be sharing it with you because we're going to be uploading it probably to Simon's. I guess they have some sort of database somewhere for their videos.
Okay, and yeah, it's good to be able to answer your questions.
Yes, well, thank you so much for being our guest. And thank you everyone who participated. And we look forward to the next guest and the next meeting for you guys. But again, thank you very much, Jerry. And we'll be in touch soon just to say hello.
And we might could get George on the next one. He's pretty much recovered from schizophrenia. And
Oh,
he
really?
can talk firsthand about his voices.
Oh, I would
Yeah.
love to set that up, Jerry. I'll be in touch and talk to you about
Yeah,
that.
you get a big enough audience and I'll trouble him for it.
Okay, that sounds good. Well, I'll be in touch about that. Thank you so
Okay.
much for offering that.
Yeah, and we have some interviews with George on our website.
Okay.
It's George Jagatic, so you can hear him actually get what I'm saying from his point of view, from the
Okay.
horse's mouth. It's
Well,
right
that would
there.
be, yes, that would be part 2 of this series then. Thank you for offering that.
JerryMarzinsky.com.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Jerry.
thank you guys.
All
Take
right.
care.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Jerry. Have a good evening.
Take care.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll see you very, very soon.
Take care.
Bye.